Okay, so welcome to the Cracks in Postmodernity. It's our first episode. Very exciting, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a podcast whose goal is to subvert the subversiveness of postmodernism through a pretentious and ironic cultural commentary.
No one knows what that means.
I know. I don't know what it means either, but that's the whole point. So, for our first inaugural episode, we're going to talk about one of the prime sources of postmodern cultural sensibility, the American University. So exciting. So I started my freshman year at an elite university in a metropolitan area that shall not be named.
Mm-hmm.
Call it Voldemort. 11 years ago.
Hogwarts.
Hogwarts University. So that was 11 years ago, and our special guest today, who is my brother, Nick, started his freshman year like 3 days ago.
Yes, believe it or not, it was wow. It was like not even a week ago yet, which is like crazy. I mean, I've only had one day of class because of the hurricane neoliberalism, but you know, what are you gonna do?
So you're a fresh man.
Oh no, sorry, Stephen. First year.
You
can't
say because it's offensive.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so what is the trajectory of the American University? How is this trajectory shaping American culture? This is what we're going to talk about. So, Nick, tell us about the first couple days of your first year experience.
Well, prior to my first day of class, I had a whopping 6 days of orientation.
Oh, God, help us.
6 days. And not only were they 6 days, it was 6 days from 8 a.m. to about 5 p.m.
Torture session.
Essentially. I mean, it was just very clear to me right off the bat. I mean, I expected all of this. I mean, I went to public school. I know what the deal is.
Mm-hmm.
It was very pat yourself on the back. But there was a lot of...
You're not an imposter.
No, there was a lot of like, they talked about imposter syndrome and how you're not
We're
an
all
imposter.
imposters.
But we all are. I mean, and the reality is, I'm not going to say, but it's imposter you. Let's be real.
Yep.
Yeah. But
PhD in imposter studies.
Yeah. And I mean, listen, every single person took it upon themselves to talk about things like anti-racism and social justice and,
which we love.
Yes, we do love these things.
With
Absolutely not. But
we don't like when you perform it, though.
It boils down to this. Yes, there was very little of anything about academics at all. It was very...
Wait, but I thought it was a university.
Well, see, Stephen, that's the issue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were not invested in, like, telling students what it would be like academically. Or, the reality is there was no emphasis on the academic rigor, which, I mean, to be truthfully honest, they're probably...
Triggering.
It is triggering. It might off-put some people.
Okay, but did anyone ever address explicitly, like, what is the point of being at a university, getting an education? Like, why are we here?
I mean, it was, flailing and fleeting and, it's to become the whole person. Oh, well.
What does it mean to be a person, though?
Well, that's a great question, Stephen. To be a person at the American, at the American University, exactly. At the American University, you're not a person. I mean, but
this is the whole point. That whatever. So to me, to be a person, it's whatever you want it to mean.
Mm-hmm.
But then it ends up meaning nothing because
correct.
There's no. Yeah.
I mean, there's this idea of like individuality when you get to the college campus for the first time, but the reality is you're all exactly the same.
So then there's no possibility of like being united as a cohesive like community, because if there's no shared understanding of like, who am I, why are we here, then like we're totally atomized little,
Of course. Okay. Well, let me get back to...
Anyway.
Yeah. A lot of posturing, a lot of lectures on how to be better people, essentially. It was like morality Olympics.
But what if you're a bad person? What do you do about that?
Well, I
You
think
stop.
we're all bad people.
But
as
that's
far as
the
I'm
point.
concerned. Yeah, we're all
They're
flawed.
training you to stop being who you are.
Well,
Don't
that's
be
the irony is that it's,
irony.
yeah,
We
the
love that.
disguise. I mean, listen, they're telling you to be who you are. You're just, whatever it is. And,
But don't be who you are.
No, of course not, because that would offend someone. And listen, I went to college, going to college now, in an attempt to get an education. But from what I can tell, in my first week, there's not much interest in that.
What is their interest?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of interest in opinion giving and person making and social justice, but not even like a social justice in a,
in a concrete.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very
sense.
like, this is something we talk.
performance.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and I told you this earlier, but I mean, it's like they have the holy trinity of books, and at every presentation, someone recommends it. The How to Be an Anti-Racist, White Fragility,
And the Bible.
Well, no, of course not.
No,
but
no.
those are the Bible. But, and like whatever the third one is, it's usually a rotating cycle of books. But listen, I'll be transparent. I've never read them. Have you?
I read excerpts of How to Be Anti-Racist. Yes.
Listen,
I don't think
and I've read them for classes as well, but I've never read them in their entirety. No. But
sorry.
I mean, listen, if someone keeps telling me to read a book, like every single person, I'm not going to read it. Why would you do that?
It's like telling people don't do drugs, don't smoke, don't drink, and then you're going to do it because people said don't do it.
I mean, it's frustrating because the reality is there's so many books. I mean, I think it reflects poorly on the people who are suggesting these books, in my eyes, because it's like, I know you're actually not that well read, because if that were the case, well, you don't think so?
No, I agree.
Oh.
It's just disappointing.
It is disappointing. And it's like, if you're referring me to the 3 same books, all right, I'm done reading those books. Now what? It's like, I know how to be anti-racist. It's a ridiculous idea. I mean, listen, and I get it, because not most people read, or at least read to an extent that, you're reading more than one book a year. But
so then this is the big thing here. There are valuable things in those books, things you can learn.
Yeah.
Things that are might actually help to counter social issues. The question is, why is it being presented as if this is the sole approach? This is like, to the point that it becomes dogma, as opposed to like, this is an approach which can be effective in some ways, has strengths, has weaknesses, like multiple other approaches. Why are we giving? I mean, but it all comes down to this for me, as we hear from our dear friend Camille, also known as Camille Paglia.
Dr. Camille. Come on, Stephen. Get it right.
So, okay, post-structuralism. Everyone's debating like, oh, should we teach critical race theory? It's really hard to have this discussion if you don't understand what post-structuralist philosophy is. And that's partially because in America, we don't care about teaching philosophy because we're pragmatists. That's from the beginning. But no, so it's a school of thought whose origin is like what? 50s, 60s, Sorbonne, France. A very particular place. And it spawns this kind of this movement of critical theory, and we use it to critique certain social norms, social ideas, so especially having to do with gender, race, class, ability, multiple social phenomena. I call it valuable food for thought. Like, it gives you real questions to consider. The solutions, questionable, but it's something worth looking at. What I can't wrap my head around is that, like, why give a particular school of thought, which again has its strengths, has its weaknesses, a monopoly when there are different perspectives we should be looking at? But so then the reactionary sense of like, let's ban it. But that's equally totalitarian.
Yeah.
It's fascist to force people to believe And it's like it's fascist to force people to believe in a religious perspective the same way. But again, to ban it, it's like, why not present this as something worth considering, but not presenting it as if this is the be all end all.
Yeah, I think especially well, I'm sorry for interrupting, but in a at least a university setting, to present anything as fact is overstepping your bounds as a professor already.
But it's the claim of neutrality, though, because it's like everything's relative, everything's neutral, except for when we tell you have.
Yeah.
So, like, if we're gonna say everything's neutral, relative, then let's maintain them. Let's be consistent.
Well, the problem is no one's neutral. I mean,
no,
I told you,
I'm not neutral.
I had a professor
it's very boring.
who openly admitted to being far left the first day in class, and I have no problem with
I'm going to just say, hold on. There's something very Freudian about that. Why do you feel the need to tell that to your students? You obviously have
I'll put it this way.
Paternal complex. You definitely do. You have a problem.
I mean, listen, I don't want to get on this professor because it's early and, I want to experience the class. Yes, but... and listen,
but that's inappropriate.
But the irony is that we're probably far left, at least politically. No,
I think we're all over the board.
Yeah,
well, it depends who's drawing up the boundaries.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like I have no problem with this lady being far left.
No,
I have a problem with her saying
that's
that.
Not professional.
No, it's not professional.
It's not your place to tell people, to tell your students.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're in a position of authority, there's a certain level of humility that comes along with that. That like, I'm here to help you, give you the tools to form your own opinion. For me to come in and say, this is my opinion. Like, maybe in certain circumstances, yes, but on the first day, like, I just feel like that's an abuse.
I thought it was odd. And then, she threw in like, but I'm open to all ideas. Well, it's like, well, thanks. Yeah. For,
you're so
saying that. And listen, I have, I'll say it again, no problem with this person being far left.
Sure. Good for you. Sister.
I think it's unfair. Listen, she clearly felt as though she was in a safe environment to disclose it. She's a professor, but they're all far left. But
but you create an alienating environment.
Yes, exactly. If there was,
what if I'm a far leftist, but not the kind you are?
Well, yeah. Like, and then that's the reality. So
that you have, it's like you could say, "Oh, I'm open to everyone," but to start by that position is automatically alienating.
Yeah,
and it's an abusive.
Again, this is a metropolitan area university, and I'm sure there's very few Trump supporters, if any. But if they were in that class,
Probably they have been killed by now.
Oh, well, and listen, I'm not in the business of like making people feel comfortable as
safe space.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like if I'm a Trump supporter in that classroom, stop it. I'd feel very uncomfortable. I mean, I don't know. I'd be upset. I'd be frustrated that my professor like alienated me on the first day of class.
But it's like but again, not professional.
No.
So here's the first Paglia quote of the day. We've all been waiting for this. So this is from Provocations. This essay was 2016, we said? Okay, so the Queen says, "Here we come to one of the most pernicious aspects of identity politics as it reshaped the American university, the confusion of teaching with social work. The issue of improper advocacy in the classroom has never been adequately addressed by the profession. Teaching and research must strive to remain objective and detached. The teacher, as an individual citizen, may and should have strong political convictions, like your professor, and activities outside the classroom. But in the classroom, he, she, or they should never take ideological positions without, at the same time, frankly acknowledging them as opinion to the students and emphasizing, oh my God, it's a long one, that all students are completely free to hold and express their own opinions on any issue, no matter how contested, from abortion, homosexuality, global warming to the existence of God, evolution." So unfortunately, because of the failure of American colleges and universities to seek and support ideological diversity. So this is the thing, diversity. Is there diversity of viewpoints, of approaches to issues?
Of course not. I mean, that's, obviously that's like a hypothetical or,
But think of all the different approaches to racism. You have Cornel West, friend of the
Friend of the
Christian socialism. You have
Mhm.
Martin Luther King's approach, the nonviolent civil disobedience. You have Malcolm X, black separatism. You have Pan-Africanism. You have all these approaches that actually came from black people who've gone
You
through.
can ignore the best of them all.
Yeah, so like, why are we
Well,
prizing this one approach and not having diversity of approaches? Like, it's very
right. I
strange.
mean, you failed to mention James Baldwin, so how dare you? But
oh, oops, I'm sorry, James Baldwin. If you're in heaven,
yeah. Well,
probably not. Pray for your sister.
But I mean, obviously there's no diversity of thought, and I showed you this before we started. But if you look up Robin DiAngelo on
I
Google,
don't want to see.
there's no photos that come up. Look, Steven is looking it up. Yeah.
She says she has Italian, though.
It's supposedly.
Come on.
You have to go to images to see her. Whereas, for anyone else, look, if I look up Ibram X. Kendi, picture comes up, of course. And you know why Robin DiAngelo doesn't come up, Steven?
Because she's not the best person to look at.
No. Well, that's not very nice.
Sorry.
It's because she's white.
She's 64. White does crack.
I mean, I don't know. I remember being a sophomore in high school, and you gave me The Fire Next Time.
Yeah.
And that was formative, to say the very least.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like cancel.
I'm sorry, this is not relevant. If you Google search her images, there's an image of her, and it has a big red canceled. But it's not because they canceled her; it's because they canceled an event because of COVID.
Ooh.
Sorry, that's fake. Anyway.
I mean, it was a formative experience, and I thought, I was like, wow, that's a really, insightful book. It really changed the way I look at things. And then when a certain event happened in May of 2020, I came to realize that people were not interested in James Baldwin.
Some are. No, but ever since that happened, I've seen more and more James Baldwin quotes floating around.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't seen.
Because I remember talking about The Fire Next Time with people, especially during a particular event. I
don't think anyone's sitting down and reading his whole essays or books.
No, of course not.
But I think it is cool
because if they did, it would be very different.
Because he says a lot of things that I think Kendi and a lot of the new critical race theory people there's a lot of overlap, but there's more depth, and ultimately it's that he's saying we all need to look at ourselves, and it's not just let's change our language, he wants a full transformation of the person,
right?
Which takes a lot more work.
Yeah, there's an idea that he has in The Fire Next Time of racism hurts white people. Yes, which seems to be lost, and that white people are solely just being racist to gain power or exert power, which is probably true. But true. Yeah, at the same time, the idea that racism is actually bad for everyone.
But it's coming from this understanding of what it means to be happy, what it means to be a good person. That's so much richer, has more nuance and depth than when I see something like Robin DiAngelo, I don't see a proposal of what does it mean to be a fulfilled, happy human being. There's no overarching image. Whereas Baldwin, when he's saying similar things that they might say, it's coming from a place of real human genius.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and with the three books that are apparently the three gospels of anti-racism, there's just, obviously it's easy to say there's no diversity of opinion in those, but the reality is that can we only read three books?
Some people can't even read one book.
Well, that's true.
People are have really short attention spans.
I know, and you know what? And I think,
and the level of writing really isn't that complex.
No, I was going to say it's easily accessible. Yes,
as opposed to reading Baldwin or Cornell. You really have to sit with it. Mm-hmm. It's going to challenge you on that, on a deeper human level.
Right.
But no, just it is very strange to me that people are going back and forth, like, should we ban critical race? I'm like, you don't even know what it is, because
Right.
most people haven't picked up a book. Most people haven't tried to understand, like, we don't ask where do these ideas come from and are they plausible, like, do they have value, what are their strengths and weaknesses. It's like, either it's the puritanical thing that, from the beginning of this country, it's like either it's evil or it's the greatest thing and we must force it on people. There's no space for nuance,
No.
shades of gray.
Yeah, and it's ironic that you mention the puritanical elements of American culture. At the same time, we're experiencing a total secularization of American culture. But not really, because at the same time, we're having these puritanical, English church, elements infiltrating, Protestant values infiltrating our culture. Not how we believe or, look at religion, obviously, but at the way we treat people. And that at the end of the day, people are bad or good.
You're saved.
Yeah.
Or
which is ridiculous. I mean, apparently we're all Calvinists. That's who it is, right? Yeah.
Which no one wants to be.
No, it's a terrible way of looking at life.
I'm sorry, but why would you want to be a Calvinist? There's no fun.
No.
But yeah, that's the thing. It's like we're in denial because we proclaim, like, okay, we're secular, we're free thought, we're open, when really we are Puritans who've kind of erased some of the, like the biblical kind of things, whatever, the worship and doctrines. But anyway,
I don't think that's a terrible thing.
Whatever.
If it were Catholic,
let's just say, if only everyone would convert to Catholicism and we had a Catholic monarch, everything would be better.
Yes, of course.
No, we don't promote that.
No, we definitely don't. We don't promote
anything.
Yeah,
at all.
No.
We're actual free thought.
We promote being yourself.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
And
I'll call you whatever you want.
Okay. As long as it's not what offends me.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so everything's falling apart. We're all gonna die.
Well, how about this, Stephen? You as an educator of
Why
the
would anyone
youth.
want to do that?
Why would you want to do that, Stephen? Why don't you tell the folks listening at home why you love to be an educator so much? You love to educate.
Because I like to force my opinions on vulnerable people who don't know what I'm doing to them. Well, no, just to think back to my own experience. Yeah, 11 years ago as a freshman at the unknown university, which we're speaking of.
It would take very little research to find this out,
but we just want to cover our bases. No, I mean, there is a lot of ideological stuff, but not nearly to the extent that you're telling me about. What I noticed was, like, that was the first time I heard about white privilege.
Right.
And I was resistant at first. And I think...
Well, I mean, that's the natural...
Yeah, I think it's natural for white people to be resistant. And at a certain point, slowly, I started to realize, no, like, there are certain experiences that I've never had to go through because people construe me as white. I'm not going to say that.
Well, yeah, well...
Because that's
we actually don't know.
Well, we weren't white 100 years ago.
Well, you definitely weren't.
I was not. Yeah. With my... Oriental blood.
Stephen's actually Arab, but
I do have Arab blood. Though.
Yes, you do.
Very little. But anyway, no. So like I slowly came to terms with that. There were a lot of really good things, though. Good people. I like that as much as there was a lot of performative kind of social justice talk, there were real opportunities to engage in, charitable works, like going on trips to see what people are experiencing, learning, like, what are the needs, how can we respond, but in a concrete way. Like that, that's what I think, like, people who want to have a real experience want to really face these big questions about social issues. Like, you got to go out of your way to find those opportunities.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I tell people this all the time, and I try to sprinkle it in the conversations I have at university, but the greatest form of social justice is creating relationships with people.
Yeah.
And I don't know why this is lost on many people.
Relationships are hard, though.
Well, they're very hard, and especially in the modern age, it's
postmodern age.
Sorry, the
no.
postmodern age. COVID era, online,
even
world.
worse now.
Yeah.
And the level of discussion is not like, it's not the level of experience of like encountering another human and asking about their life. It's very
it's totally detached, and
that's I have to say this also, that like what helped me to understand that there are privileges that come with being construed as white is when people actually opened up, took the risk of sharing themselves with me. And look, that this is a thing that I've also had to realize, is that can be very hard if you've really gone through some really painful experiences, whether based on your identity, based on, I don't know, whatever suffering. To share your suffering with someone is like, it's really hard to trust them because you don't know how they're going to respond. You don't know if they're going to hurt you. Right. But thankfully, some people did trust me, and I learned a lot from it. So I don't think this kind of dialogue, these relationships, are what's encouraged at this point.
No, I mean, it's a lot of, this is an objective truth that people are presenting to you, and there's no discussion, which is unfortunate, because there is a lot of room for discussion about something like this.
We need discussion,
of course,
which is hard.
It's very hard,
but we got to do the work.
Yes, we got to do the work. That's what a lot of people, that's what they always say.
But yeah, so the question of why is this very abstract, theoretical approach the one that's favored by universities, by corporations? Ultimately, it's elitism.
Yeah, it's, and I think it's objectively hard to comprehend. At least, from an outsider perspective looking in at something like critical race theory, it's hard to understand.
Yeah.
Which is why I think, especially for universities and elite institutions, a big point of maintaining the idea that it is an elite institution is by keeping people confused, and by maintaining this level of, elitism, to make it seem like they're above the working class, essentially.
And what makes it elite is essentially that you're approaching very real issues, very concrete issues, in such an abstract way, while claiming that this is the absolute answer, when in reality it's like you're advocating for these people who are in reality concretely oppressed, suffering, but responding to these people in a way that's just so foreign to their lived experience, to any human's real lived everyday life kind of experience.
Yeah.
And this is what Lasch talks about.
Especially when he talks
Speaking
about
of Christopher Lasch.
Yes. Christopher Lasch, the biblical prophet himself.
Allah's mouthpiece.
Huh?
Allah's mouthpiece.
Yes, of course. He says, the corporate policies of the university, both internal and external, addition of new departments and programs, cooperation in more research, blah, 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 blah. Where's the part about what I'm talking about? Okay, here we go. The whole problem of American education comes down to this. In American society, almost everyone identifies intellectual excellence with elitism. The attitude not only guarantees the monopolization of educational advantage by the few, it lowers the quality of elite education itself and threatens to bring about a reign of universal ignorance.
Spot the lie.
Yeah, that's the truth, Ruth.
Yeah. So let's advocate for people who are genuinely oppressed, but so that they will come over to this. Again, and we should clarify, when I'm saying elitist, I'm not talking necessarily about people who are upper class, who are privileged in many ways. It's more of we're talking about a moral kind of spiritual worldview. It's a view that favors those who don't have to live in the midst of very hands-on everyday experiences, especially people who do manual labor, or who have commitments to their families, to traditions, to cultures, to roots. It's very detached from real everyday human life.
Of course. Yeah.
Which people who are oppressed, that has a certain significance for them, as opposed to people who are very privileged, who can forego all those things.
I've noticed this about a lot of the material, at least that I've been assigned in the first couple weeks of class, or days of class, I should say. It's a lot of it's New York Times, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, which, again, at least in certain circles, esteemed publications.
Esteemed. I don't want to be part of those circles.
Well, at the same time, a lot of it, like, you read these things and it's like...
Can I just say
it's like a robot's writing it.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of it's been New York Times, New Yorker, and... The Atlantic, and et cetera, and a lot of it is like, these are esteemed papers of publication, and which is ridiculous. But the first thing I noticed when reading these kinds of articles is it's like they were written by some artificial intelligence modeled to...
White Lotus.
What about
What's her name? Shane's wife?
Correct.
The way she wrote the article.
Exactly. It's the same
just
exact,
copied and pasted.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, and that's essentially every article that's published in New York Times
or
or
Wikipedia.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, I understand it because like people read that, but at the same time, it's like it's literally like reading an AI generated article. Yeah. So, and I don't know why professors, as you'll get into.
Speaking of professors,
why they
Professor
recommend this?
Paglia once said, and I quote, so this is her talking about when post-structural thought started to spread in American universities. She said it was like the 70s. Started at Johns Hopkins, moved to Yale. And when we're talking about post-structuralism, talking about Derrida, Lacan, Foucault, who you will read, unfortunately you have to, you have no choice. Okay, so she was like, when she was first exposed to Lacan and Derrida, the first time I witnessed a continental theorist discoursing with professors at a Yale event, I said in exasperation to a fellow student, they're like high priests murmuring to each other. It is absurd that the elitist theoretical style, with its opaque and contorted jargon, was ever considered leftist, as it still is. Authentic leftism is populist, with the brutal directness of speech. Sounds like some people we know.
Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts, Stephen?
Yeah, so it's elitist, though. And ultimately, yeah, what's hypocritical is that you're claiming to advocate for certain people who have gone through real oppression, struggling, but the worldview you're presenting is very foreign to their experience, but to most humans' lived experience. Mm-hmm. And I've seen in my own experience working with primarily like people of color, young men, that they tend not to have a taste for the way that these problems are construed by elites, because it just doesn't resonate with the way that they perceive relationships, just reality in general. Mm-hmm. So it's like, why are you claiming to advocate for people when you're alienating them with the kind of moral, spiritual worldview you're ascribing to? Yeah,
and I would never say you shouldn't trust your professor or not listen to them, because that's ridiculous, and you should respect.
You should engage what your
you should engage.
Yeah.
But the problem is when they're presenting something and they're in a position of authority, it's automatically at least perceived to be relatively true.
You have power when you're in authority.
Especially in, younger,
as
high
an
school.
Educator.
Yeah.
And there's a level of humility you have to have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And my experience in middle school, which and I had a teacher who was very formative for me at least, but who was very much invested in telling everyone his opinion about like politics. And this is like 2014, 2015, 2016. And now I'm showing how young I am. Oh well. And that was like a time when people, and listen, these were like mushy brain children, who were like just taking this, I don't want to say nonsense. I mean, a lot of it was nonsense, but
so it comes down to a crisis of education. Ultimately, that education, is it the place where we indoctrinate people with the correct views, or we give them the tools to arrive at reasonable conclusions themselves?
Right. Yeah, and that was a problem especially with the orientation process.
Mm-hmm.
It offered nothing other than, like, we're going to talk about social injustice and, but social
Don't get drunk.
Yeah, don't get drunk.
Don't rape anyone.
Yes, listen to the important. I mean, those were important. of all the information we got, that was probably the most important thing.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
It's pretty important.
yeah, and
Don't do it.
the rest of it was a lot of, like, racism, social injustice is a thing. It's like, okay, and, like, what should we do? And it was nothing, you know. And listen, I understand that, you know, no one's in the business of giving answers unless, you know, you're in
the Pope.
Yeah. Well, the Pope of higher education. But,
Infallible dogma.
you know, it was just frustrating, and, oh well, you know, and what you were saying about, like, woke culture not resonating with people, I think it's also, like, a men and women thing. Like, men do not care about.
Men don't care about anything except their pleasure and power.
I don't know about that.
Because men are stupid. It's a scientific fact.
Is it? Yeah.
I can prove it to you.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is Paglia again, though, that, like, you know, this is why men try to dominate, because we know how dumb we are. So then we try to, like, intimidate the woman, but the woman knows that we're stupid and can overpower us.
Yeah. I mean, and that's when I was talking about, like, liberal ideology and how it literally devalues human beings, and that it views them as, like, these
no lives matter.
Yeah, no lives matter, essentially, and that, like, it views people as these very weak, feeble-minded people who can't understand and comprehend how to do basic things and how to function as human beings and flourish, because ultimately they believe that, or at least present the idea that because of your predisposition, you know, race, gender, class, whatever, that you're going to have all these obstacles that you can't overcome and it's not your fault. When in reality, like, yeah, these obstacles are real, but you can totally overcome them. You know, the human spirit is unbreakable.
There's that.
Yeah.
There is this bigger social question, though, of, like, yeah, certain structures should be adjusted, but my freedom is not contingent upon. Like, you know, it's like, it's a both and thing.
Right.
It's like, yeah, we need to correct social structures that are oppressive and that alienate people, exclude people. But also there's a need to form the individual person themselves, imbue them with a sense of dignity, inner strength. It has to go hand in hand. Like, we can't exclude one or the other.
No. And that's why I think, you know, there's this perception that women are weak and, you know, don't have power. When in reality, they have far more power than men, at least, you know, and in a nature perspective. I mean, that's probably right from sexual persona.
Nature doesn't exist.
It does not exist.
That.
What are you saying?
No, I'm offended by that statement.
Oh, really?
There's no nature. There's no truth. No. But back to orientation. This is the thing. It's like, when you don't present the both and of, like, personal formation, growth, alongside with, you know, looking at social issues, like, you end up presenting something that's very either ideological or just purely sentimental. There's no sense of, like, real substance. That's what at least I remember from my orientation. It's like, you use certain buzzwords about, you know, growing as a person and, like, being fully formed, and then, which is purely sentimental, and then you present the social issue from a very ideological perspective. It's not grounded in, like, something really solid.
No, of course not. Yeah, and, you know, the thing is, and I don't think people care. You know, I think people are literally...
I think people want more. They just don't
well,
know how
you know
to
what?
voice
Actually,
that.
I agree. You know,
We all want it.
Talking to people, a lot of people were frustrated how long we're sitting there, which is, you know, like a...
Because if you're sitting
instinct,
there for a long time and there's something really substantial, meaningful...
Yeah, if you're being stimulated and you know, you're actually taking in something you understand and enjoy and, you know, resonate with, and you don't care. But, you know, sitting there for 8 hours a day and, like, being talked at about certain, you know, and listen, the important stuff like safety and alcohol and sexual education, that stuff's important, and you should listen, you know, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, like, you know, they had a couple guest speakers, and I took away nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, at the end of every single one, I was recommended, Foucault or, the Holy Trinity that I mentioned earlier. But, it's like, and it's like, okay, I get it. Like, I get it. Why are we still doing this? And it's like, what am I getting out of this? What am I understanding? And I guess it's like, does that cater to the people who are from, the Midwest and Kansas who have never interacted with anyone other than themselves, I don't know. It's just, it's very interesting to me that this is what we consider orienting.
Yeah, so it's
it's disorienting, if anything.
But that's the point. It's like you present this, again, very sentimental, ideological worldview, which, first of all, Baldwin hated those two things.
Yes.
That's why you need to read Baldwin. But in turn, you're presenting nothingness. You're presenting something very empty and vapid. I'm going to pull out the Deneen quote. It talks about, so like the multiculturalism thing is really a play for anti-culture. So he says, whereas culture is an accumulation of local and historical experience and memory. So the whole idea that, like, the lived everyday experience, the sense of being rooted in something concrete. Liberal culture, scare quotes, is the vacuum that remains when local experience has been eviscerated. Memory is lost and every place becomes every other place. A panoply of actual cultures is replaced by celebration of multiculturalism. The reduction of actual cultural variety to liberal homogeneity, loosely dressed in easily discarded native garb. Even as cultures are replaced by a pervasive anti-culture, the language of culture is advanced as a means of rendering liberal humanity's detachment from specific cultures. So ultimately, he says homogeneous celebration of every culture effectively means no culture at all.
Yeah, I mean, I notice this, at least, especially now, is that most cultures, at least ethnic cultures, are the direct antithesis of, like, liberal ideology. It flies in the face.
Because it's WASP idea. That's ultimately what it is.
I mean, we can't say that, but...
But this is what happens when you erase ethnicity, that, like, everything is reduced to these very abstract categories, which are not rooted in everyday reality. So you have white, but who's white?
Well,
I mean, WASPs
I
are
don't know.
white.
Are people ready for that?
That's the thing, though. But ultimately, there's no real substantial culture being presented, and you can see that very clearly when you're in orientation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a like, the people call it multiculturalism. Nonsense, because it's not. It's
different
one
flavors of nothingness.
Yeah, exactly. It's
like water that's dyed different colors with no flavor.
It's like it literally is this. It's when, like, upper class white people talk about social justice and post about it on Facebook or whatever it may be. It's alienating because it feels wrong, and that's essentially what it is. It's like a culture that has nothing to do with anything. That's just, and that's what's being presented in college and universities, and that's unfortunate.
So this guy on Instagram, I don't know who he actually is. Zizek. I don't know what his real name is. Zizek on a Wired Brain. This is this guy's account. I don't know how I found him. I think I know how I found him. How I find most people. He posted this, like, they're images of a dorm room that's totally trashed, and he, like, let me read this. Fascinating. So he said, the American university system perfectly plays its function to the ruling class. The student is looking down the barrel of anhedonia, like hedonism maybe? I have no idea. Here are the glittering palaces of concrete decadence, soil that rides without contention or reason. So he continues, what did he say? So the student is made to study the systems of knowledge as opposed to learning. Okay, so that's the whole thing of being handed down opinions rather than being given the tools to, like, come to conclusions. Bogged down by a diet of cheap liquor and food not fit for human consumption, the result is a new and dangerous class, like that of the forlorn janissary who eats, sleeps, and drinks as though no one is watching. But they are, the elites. They watch these spurn nights for any signs of dignity that may be written into your mind. Dignity is a problem for the becoming elite. And then he goes on to say, this is why everyone drinks and gets fucked up. It's not because they actually... So he's like, no one says, I want to just have some drinks and have a good time. Like, you drink to the point of oblivion because the desire to become fucked up is proof positive that you already are fucked up, and that alcohol is a cursory notion to the task at hand of the psyche. So it's like...
Okay, question.
Nothingness.
I don't think this guy wrote that.
I think he did, because it's not
sure?
Zizek.
But it might be someone, and we're going to sound like real idiots.
No, I think he wrote it.
Okay.
If not...
I mean, yeah.
If not, then it was Zizek. Zizek. Anyway.
I mean, yes.
But spot the lie.
Yeah,
again.
I mean, yeah. That was even the case in high school.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the fact that there's like nothing being proposed, like you want to embody this kind of
I mean, it's just a
nothingness.
total empty feeling. I mean, listen, and I talk about this especially with people my age, is that we're collectively, I mean, at least a majority of young people are completely miserable.
Yeah.
And they're so miserable to the point that they have no one to talk to, that they resort to online discourse about how miserable they are and how desperate they are for something, and how they feel totally empty inside. And that's horrifying, because that was not the case literally 10 years ago. That was not the case.
Was it?
No. Well,
I think it was the case we weren't as aware of it, though.
Yes.
It wasn't as, like, intense.
20 years ago, it didn't exist, because social media didn't exist.
Yeah. I think it was paving the way, though.
Of course,
I think this was all coming.
But at the same time...
It was cracking.
Oh. You mean, like, cracks in postmodernity?
No, not that.
Oh.
But you get the picture.
Yeah.
It was cracking.
I mean, listen, and people are completely miserable. Why? Because they have nothing to strive for. They have nothing to connect with themselves and feel meaning. You know, if you're just constantly, immersed in online discourse about social justice or, whatever cultural, norm culture, what's a good word for it? I mean, popular culture.
Yeah.
That exists. You're gonna be miserable. I mean, the internet is essentially just it's a very dark place for a human being, and it's not fit for human beings. It's robots trying to, conform to human beings and how their minds work, and they do it very well, scarily well. I mean, I don't. Neither of us have a TikTok, I don't think.
No,
I don't.
God,
Yeah.
no. Please.
But I see it, and it's like everyone's like, oh, it's so addicting. They know like what you like, and they show you what you like. And like that's scary,
But
because
why
it's
go
totally
on it then if you know that it's empty?
well, it's legitimately addictive
because there isn't an
there's
alternative.
nothing else. Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
thing. Like if you're presented with something substantial, then it makes something like TikTok like, okay, well that's cute, but in a world with no real substantial options. So what is the solution then?
Well,
drop out of universities, live in communes.
No.
Throw your phone in the garbage.
Well,
They'll track you though.
That would be nice.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
So what are we gonna do?
I mean, we talk about this, but you need to build actual relationships with people, like human beings. Like you need to go out and talk to people, which is a very scary thought.
Yeah.
And actually, during a lot of the orientation process, that was like acknowledged that talking to people is hard, and like you should DM on Instagram the head of a club at your university and ask to join.
Better,
or you could go talk to them.
them.
Yeah. Go ask to be in the club. What a marvelous idea. I mean, totally revolutionary, but I mean, it's like, it's mind-boggling, because it's like we've done this for millennia, or probably not millennia, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden we've thrown it away in a matter of 20 years.
So the point is, take risks. Even if you feel like, you're fragile and you're going to fall apart, do it.
Mm-hmm. And embrace your culture, that too.
Well, I think that's most important. Like,
yeah.
You have to have some starting point.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start somewhere, whether it's your culture, ethnically speaking, whatever values, beliefs are handed down to you. But again, like, interact, have
Mhm.
conversations, have experience. I think having experiences, like we were saying, like
Yeah.
if you're interested in social issues, like go be
Yeah,
with
do
people
it.
and like put yourself in those situations so you can understand like what's actually happening rather than
Mhm.
what theories or what's on the internet.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen.
Case closed.
Case
We
closed.
solved
Yeah.
the problems of postmodernity.
Everyone.
That's the whole
If
series.
they listen to this,
Goodbye.
very lucky. Very, very, very lucky.
No, we should charge people.
Yeah. Oh,
No,
well.
not yet.
Well,
Not yet. We have to actually get
maybe
real
one day.
listeners, inshallah. So before we leave,
Mhm.
you should follow Cracks in Postmodernity on the gram. If you don't, I think that's it. Is there anything else?
I got nothing.
Yeah.
I said what I wanted to say.
All right. The end. Thank you for listening.
Mhm.
I hope you've been sufficiently scandalized.
That's nice.
Yep. Bye.